our argument is not that cars by themselves are bad technology, because you can sort of be labeled as a Luddite for this kind of stuff, but that we have over deployed them in a way that is completely harmful to our own lives, to the planet, to political cohesion, to society in general. And that if you look around the world at the places that we think are the best places, they usually have not no cars, but they've just put cars in their proper place.
I'm not saying you need to give up your car, but imagine that you didn't have to drive everywhere. You didn't always have to be in a car. Think about what that would be like to live in a place where you could walk or bike or take a bus or whatever with yourself, your kids, and it would be fine. And you wouldn't have to get into that car because I think a lot of people are perceiving the car as a burden a lot of the time.
Hello and welcome to Why Is This Happening? With me, your host, Chris Hayes. This weekend, I did the MSNBC Live event in New York, which was great. Got to meet a lot of folks. Also got to hang out with some of my colleagues, including the great Jacob Soboroff, who was a good buddy of mine and someone I really like. And he and I were reminiscing about the first time that we ever spent time together, which was we were both like in 2017 basically chasing Hurricane Irma, which made landfall as a Category 5 in Florida on the Gulf Coast. And he and I both ended up in Naples, Florida, and ended up staying in the same hotel, which was this one that we sort of found through weird back channels. And we were remembering this. And one of the things that has always struck me about that was the first time I'd ever been in the aftermath of like a really big catastrophic storm. And there's two things that become real evident in the wake of a storm like that, which is what are the essential technologies upon which our life functions? And it becomes very clear immediately that the two in a place like the Gulf Coast of Florida is electricity, right? So electricity goes out and you don't have air conditioning, elevators don't work in buildings, obviously people are running off generators, and cars. Very quickly in the wake of a hurricane, the question of will there be fuel becomes this overwhelming question, right? Because you've got a car, maybe it's got half a tank of gas. You're going to need to go places or you're going to need to get to an airport. And in the immediate aftermath of a storm like that, like all the gasoline supply routes are disrupted and places don't have gas. And you're sort of driving around looking at this meter going down in this really stressful way. In fact, Jacob and I were reminiscing that the NBC field ops people ended up paying two guys from Georgia who drove a convoy of trucks into Naples in the middle of the night with gas to like fill up our cars so that we could drive to Tampa to fly out. And the reason I think about that is, same thing with COVID, this sort of idea when things kind of collapse, you get this sort of vision of what society is and what we sort of depend on. Just the centrality of the car and electricity as the kind of twin pillars of modern life. And it's always stuck with me. And part of the reason it stuck with me is because I am very much not a car person. I've been really lucky in my life. I was born and raised in New York City. I grew up taking public transportation. I grew up walking a lot. I've lived in dense, walkable urban environments my whole life. The three cities I lived in is New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Chicago's a little more of a car culture, particularly in the winter, particularly because it's more spread out. And I've always just been like, to me, being in a car for long periods of time is a nightmare. I hate it. I want to avoid it at all costs. It's just a deep, visceral thing with me. I'll never forget in college, I met this kid who's become a very good friend. I love him from Alabama. And he had his car with him. It was like our junior year. And he's like, you want to go for a drive? I'm like, where are we going to go? He's like, just go for a drive. I'm like, why would we get in a car to drive around if we don't have somewhere to be? He's like, no, that's what we do. It's like got in the car and like put on the Weezer album and just talked and listened. It was kind of fun, but it was just like, man, is this a foreign culture for me? The car is so ubiquitous, both as a technology, as a way of structuring public space, and as a way of ordering our lives that it's basically invisible. In the same way electricity is, right? If you think for like 5 seconds, like, where does the electricity come from? It's like, I don't know. Somehow comes into the house. The car is sort of the same thing, right? And we're living in this incredible moment 70 plus years into sort of car domination of American life where we have this energy transformation that's happening. We've got to get off fossil fuels very quickly to avoid planetary catastrophe. And also there's a kind of technological revolution happening around both AI and around batteries and non-combustion engines. And it's an incredible moment to sort of rethink, like, is it the case that the car has to be the central ordering technology upon which all life depends? Maybe that's just a historical accident. Maybe it's very contingent, and we'll look back on it the way that we look at horse and buggies now, or we look at the canal system. That there will be something after life after cars. And I've long been a big fan of a blog called, well, the Streets blog, and also War on Cars, intentionally provocatively named. And the folks who run that have a new book out called Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. It's by Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon, co-authored along with Aaron Naparstek. And Sarah and Doug join me now. Great to have you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, really great to be here.
You guys are, I'm big fans of yours, although you are kind of zealots, I will say.
Well, thank you for allowing us that, because I think zealotry is perhaps an appropriate response to the hegemony, the destructive hegemony of car culture. And, you know, we like to see ourselves as the people who will push really hard from way over on the edge and try to get that Overton window moved a little bit. So yeah, somebody's got to do it, and I guess it's us.
Yeah, I wear it as a badge of honor. I think you get called a zealot when you do bicycle advocacy or safe streets advocacy, whether you're advocating for the removal of one parking space to make a crosswalk safer, or 1,000 parking spaces to put in a whole new bus line or transit system. So if someone calls me a zealot, I think, okay, that's fine. I'll wear that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you guys talk about in the book, and one of the things I've seen up close, is how emotionally and viscerally people respond to this stuff. And I want to get into that a little bit. First, I want to just start with your own stories of, like, you know, for me, I come from a long line of walkers. I just was always, like, my mom's family particularly are just like people who really like to walk a lot. It's always been part of my life. I love walking. I take a walk every day. I've taken a walk almost every day that I've kind of been a teenager or adult. I've grown up in New York City. So I've always been a person who just doesn't viscerally like being in cars. I've been very lucky. That's very contingent too, right? It's as much about where I was raised, and I could have been born someone else and love cars. But how did you guys kind of, Sarah, I'll start with you, like find your way to the kind of, you know, safe, humane streets / you know, anti-car movement?
So I, like you, grew up in New York City, grew up walking, taking public transportation everywhere. I went to school in California and didn't learn to drive until after I graduated, because I was in the Bay Area and it was pretty doable to not be able to drive. But eventually I was like, okay, I got to learn how to drive. I came back to New York, didn't own a car. And then I spent 8 years living in Maine, including in some very rural parts of Maine. And I had to depend on a car. I became car dependent for the first time in my life. And this was in the 90s, at a time when there was a lot of drama about how dangerous New York City was. And it was kind of dangerous back then. There was a high murder rate at the time. And, you know, I got to Maine and everyone was saying, wow, you know, I can't believe you survived living in New York. And pretty much as soon as I got there, I met somebody whose father got killed driving. And then I met another person who killed somebody else while they were driving. And then. And it was just like one person after another who had some catastrophic story. And then I got into a really bad crash that was not my fault. And the other person was very badly injured. And it became clear to me how oppressive car dependence was, that and especially when my car had to be in the shop after a crash. I couldn't get to work. I couldn't figure out how to get to work. Also, I was broke the whole time I was living there. I would put maybe $4 or $5 of gas in at a time because that was all I could afford. And it just became clear to me, like, I really don't want to live like this, and it's really oppressive, and I hadn't really had to reckon with that before. I moved back to New York eventually, and it was great. And I was doing general interest journalism, and then I answered an ad for Streets blog. They wanted somebody to cover Michael Bloomberg's press conference announcing Plan YC, which was his climate adaptation plan. And this was in December of 2006. And I answered that ad and I turned the story around by the next day. And Aaron Naparstek, who was the editor, thought I did a good job, I guess. So I started covering that stuff. I had covered some of it before as a general interest journalist, but I just kept doing it more. And then there became this explosion. The Atlantic founded Atlantic Cities, which is now City Lab and owned by Bloomberg. Grist, I worked for Grist. All these outlets wanted stories about urban design, transportation planning, and the kind of transportation revolution that was happening. And so it just became my beat. And that's how I got into it.
My family is from New York. My dad's from the Bronx. My grandmother was born here. And so we spent a lot of time as a family visiting New York City. But I mostly grew up in a suburb north of Boston. And it was very car dependent. I lived on a cul-de-sac. I was driven to school. You had to drive everywhere. And because I spent so much time visiting New York, I just had this almost like intuitive love for the city itself and for cities in general. And in fact, when I got my driver's license, I would pile my friends into the car and then drive into Boston and park it and then take the T and walk around different neighborhoods. And then after college, I followed a girlfriend to Atlanta, and I just hated driving everywhere. I liked Atlanta. I liked the culture, the food, the music. It was a really fun place to live in your early 20s. But I think similar to Sarah, I was broke. I was making like $21,000 a year in my first job. My transmission on my car broke, and that was like a $5,000 repair. Then the girlfriend and I broke up. Being single in a car-dependent city is tough. It's really hard to make plans with people. And a lot of my friends were living in New York. I'm like, you know what? I got family up here. My friends are here. I'm going to move. And as soon as I got here, I felt that sort of like the relief you feel when you're coming home from a work trip or something like that. It just made sense. Cut to a bunch of years later. I'm a television producer and writer in my professional background, and I was just between freelance gigs, and I was like, yeah, I want to flex the writing muscle. I'm going to write about something that's interesting to me. I don't want it to be like a general purpose blog sort of situation. So I started writing about the street transformations that I was seeing in my neighborhood and on my commutes around the city. And at that point, it was about 2010. There was a big fight over the Prospect Park West bike lane, on the west side of Prospect Park. Epic.
Really,
it was like
can't
truly
understand.
a political
Truly
defining.
insane.
Yeah, if you don't know, like if we hadn't won that,
just to be
fight-
clear, Prospect Park. There's two Frederick Law Olmsted designed parks in New York City. There's Central Park and Prospect Park. They're both beautiful. Prospect Park, I think, is a little better.
Agreed.
But I mean, it's an incredible masterpiece. They're both masterpieces. And there's a street called Prospect Park West that runs along the side of it. It had been drivers drive pretty fast on it because it has almost a kind of thoroughfare feel in a different way than other avenues. And there was a long fight to just get two little narrow green stripped protected bike lanes running the 1.5 mile length of that,
Exactly.
which exists now, and I am on basically every single day of my life, and is a beautiful, obvious part of the infrastructure that was fought tooth and nail.
Yeah, and that was really heating up. So Streets blog was covering the bigger fight over bike lanes, and this was under the tenure of Jeanette Sadiq-Khan at the DOT. She was the commissioner at that point. But I was really covering kind of the granular fight at the neighborhood level, at community boards. And I just started to get, because, I mean, Chris, like as a TV producer, as a host, you have to be an instant expert on lots of things at once. You really have to do your homework. And that's how I started treating the bike lane stuff and Safe Streets. I just started reading as much as I could, following as many people as I could to inform my own writing and my own advocacy. And here I am.
So I want to start with, there's two places where I want to start with a conversation, and two things you guys do in the book that I think are really useful is taking a step back and thinking about the contingency of the car and the car culture, because it is so natural, right? It's like if you guys came out the book being like, we have to get rid of electricity. No, I mean, seriously, it's like that for a lot of people, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean?
Right.
You're going to have outhouses and we're going to have, so, there's a lot of reasons that people think that this is a sort of natural part of development.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is really interesting, and maybe Sarah, you can talk about this, like in the book, is just going back to the transition period where cars were the new thing and people's status quo bias was pointed at the new thing being cars, as opposed to people's status quo bias being pointed at taking car lanes away or putting in a bike lane, right? Because people do have status quo bias, and new things, things come along and people are scared of them. But when the car sort of started entering public life, people are like, whoa, this thing is really, really, really dangerous.
Yeah, and it was killing a lot of people right away. I mean, people weren't prepared for it. Children were being run over in the street on a regular basis, and the outcry was immediate and loud. And people referred to drivers who killed people as murderers and, cars as death machines and, all of that. They put up memorials to the victims of car violence in cities like New York. And there was a huge outcry about it. And a lot of it was class based because the people who had cars tended to be the very wealthy, and they would use them to sort of tear through neighborhoods. Harlem was a neighborhood that was really affected because people were driving through Harlem on their way out to the country, and so there was this sense that the people who were driving were these hyper privileged and careless, reckless people who were essentially oppressing the ordinary people who used to be able to walk in the street. The children used to be able to play in the street, and all of that changed really rapidly, and people were not happy about it.
Yeah, there's this great graphic from the New York Times of like a car driving over skulls and about the deaths and the sort of class aspect. And when you wrote about that, I thought about the center of Great Gatsby, right? Is careless people speeding around in their fancy cars, careless rich people like killing working class folks as they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we in the book we talk about how cars were sort of the original move fast and break things technology in a sort of Silicon Valley sense of, but also literally they moved faster than anything that was on the streets before. They killed a lot of people, and the people who were interested in advancing this new technology didn't have a lot of regard for the common good or the health effects. It was sort of like, let's get this technology out there and then we'll figure out how to tame it or not tame it, as the case may be.
There's a fight you guys chronicle I thought was so interesting where Cincinnati wants to do a municipal ordinance that would require an installed governor on every car limiting the speed. And this is one of these first sort of like moments where there's a big public fight on this stuff.
Yeah, we did a lot of research, and much of it comes from Peter Norton, who is a historian at the University of Virginia, who wrote an excellent book called Fighting Traffic that documents this early period of the 1910s, 1920s. And in the 1920s, you had these cars that were speeding through probably 30, 40 miles an hour in the city. And the city wanted to require all cars in the city to be come equipped with a speed governor that would limit them to 20, 25 miles an hour. And initially, this was very popular. There were tens of thousands of signatures in support of this ordinance. But the forces of I always say mortar because it's like a Lord of the Rings sort of fight to it, but motordom, as Peter Norton calls it, the consortium of auto companies and road builders and auto clubs and enthusiasts fought back and said, well, we have a real image problem with cars. We have to, this is bad. And if this wins, it's going to spread to other cities. So they sent letters to every registered car owner in the city. They took out ads in the local papers, basically saying that if this passed, it would be like installing a great wall of China around the city of Cincinnati, and that drivers would take their business to Indianapolis or other cities, and it would just be a kind of death knell for the city's economy. And you saw in that short period, public opinion just totally shift from, yes, let's install speed governors in every car, to absolutely not. And as Peter writes in the book, to use another wartime analogy like the war on cars, that the forces of motordom never regained a peacetime footing, as he says. They just continued to push this idea that any restriction on where cars could go and how fast they could get there was an assault on freedom.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has read Unsafe at Any Speed, how devious and insidious, right? The sort of motor interests can be. And you guys note, Sarah, that the American love affair with cars, which we now is like a a sort of thought-killing cliche that everyone just says as a natural thing was like literally invented as a marketing
Yeah,
propaganda.
that was the tagline of a TV special that Groucho Marx did, that was funded by DuPont, which of course has plenty of interest in the chemicals that go into cars and all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's it, this is a manufactured consent in a way. And what's interesting is to think of, now these days we talk about putting speed governors on e-bikes because, oh my God, e-bikes are taking over and it's terrifying to people and they need to be limited to 15 miles an hour. That's a conversation that's happening right now in New York City and probably will happen in other places eventually. And of course, okay, but like, why don't we do that with cars, which are much bigger and more dangerous and numerous and cause a lot more mayhem?
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about that in a second, but just to stay on this for a second, because I do think it's important to make this distinction. Like, to the extent the sort of development of the car was sort of contingent, it was produced by enormous amounts of public investment, the interstate highway system, the power and might of motordom. If it was manufactured or not, like, it's a real thing now. To the extent that these things can be organic, it's organic, right? Like, no one has to propagandize a person now to be like, I love my car, I love being able to drive, and also they're remarkable technologies. I mean, it's the most sophisticated and most dangerous piece of consumer technology that a consumer could buy anywhere in the world. It's a miracle the thing works. I mean, when you think about how often a cell phone call drops. Right? Think about how high the stakes are for this technology. I mean, there's multiple hundreds of different working parts. They're working at incredibly high heat and high speeds. I mean, the fact the thing works is actually just this incredible marvel of consumer engineering. It really is. They are also profoundly dangerous. They kill tens of thousands of people a year. One of the things given all that, right? So let's talk a little bit about the reaction people have to cars, because, and I'm talking here on behalf of people that I know and love, who I have this very debate with. Because I'm kind of like, I'm not quite as a zealot as much as you guys are, but I'm sympathetic to your cause.
We'll get
but
you
like,
there, Chris. We'll
yeah,
get you
I
there.
would be in the right flank of the War on Cars caucus.
Okay,
I would
fair
be
enough.
a right deviationist in the War on Cars caucus, and an incrementalist. But I'm sympathetic generally, and I'm a person who bikes to work, and I take the subway, and I don't use cars very much. There's a lot of things about cars that are obviously incredibly useful, and transformative and economically beneficial. I mean, the distances that have shrunk the ability of modern supply chains. How do you sort of approach a person? Like, when people talk about, like, well, cars also they're not just negatives, there's benefits too. And how should we be thinking about those competing benefits and negatives, particularly in the built environment, or particularly when we're talking about public spaces or things we all sort of share and enjoy?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and we try to do this a lot in our advocacy and in the book, to acknowledge exactly what you're talking about. First of all, there are people for whom getting around by automobile is their only choice, either to drive themselves or be driven by someone else.
Most people in most parts of the country, to be clear.
But I'm very specifically talking, right, about like people with mobility issues, elderly people. But
Exactly,
in 99% of the country, your built environment, if you took me, the most diehard, like, general in the War on Cars, and dropped me in the middle of Texas, I'd have to get a car. I'd have to have a car, right? Yeah. But so we want to have sensitivity for those people. Our argument is not that cars by themselves are bad technology, because you can sort of be labeled as a Luddite for this kind of stuff, but that we have over deployed them in a way that is completely harmful to our own lives, to the planet, to political cohesion, to society in general. And that if you look around the world at the places that we think are the best places, they usually have not no cars, but they've just put cars in their proper place. Dutch drivers are among the most satisfied drivers on the planet, and survey after survey bears this out, because when you need to drive as a Dutch citizen, you are not stuck in traffic behind lots of other people who are like driving a Ford F-150 to go get a gallon of milk. You're driving because you have to go a distance you can't otherwise reach, or to a destination that is just beyond public transit or biking. And that's sort of the world that when we talk about life after cars, that's what we mean. Not life with no cars, not ban all cars, but like let's just reimagine in the way that New York is and other cities are the proper place of cars in our lives. And I think the other confounding thing about our movement is sort of like you're saying, there's sort of this like natural progression of technology. We had horses and buggies, we had the Model T, we had all of the muscle cars of the 50s and 60s, and we have electric cars. One day we'll have autonomous cars everywhere, and then maybe flying cars. But really, if you look at the places that are doing this right, they're using 19th century technology to solve 21st century problems. And that is what is confounding about our movement. We're not saying ban all cars, but like a bicycle is going to be a really good tool for a lot of people in environments where it can be made safe to ride a bike.
Yeah, and also I want to say that a lot of the time when you ask people about their cars, sure, they say, I love my car, I love driving. But a lot of the time they say, I wish I didn't have to drive everywhere.
Yeah.
That's actually something that I hear all the time from people who live in car dependent situations. They don't love a lot of their time in the car because, sure, a road trip is really fun, but commuting for an hour and a half on, I-95 is not a lot of fun. And nobody thinks that's fun. And that is most of the driving that people do. And so I think that's really important that's a connection point that I find with people where I say like, look, I'm not saying you need to give up your car, but imagine that you didn't have to drive everywhere. You didn't always have to be in a car. Think about what that would be like to live in a place where you could walk or bike or take a bus or whatever with yourself, your kids, and it would be fine, and you wouldn't have to get into that car. Because I think a lot of people are perceiving the car as a burden a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I've traveled around a fair amount, and I was a book tour, and one of the things that's funny is you can always make a joke about the local area's traffic that people will think is like a specific, like in the same way that like everyone thinks their sports team is cursed, that that like everyone is like, oh yeah, Miami traffic, Atlanta traffic, wherever it is, you can make the joke about the traffic, and everyone hates the traffic in the area they're at and thinks it's terrible, and it's like one of these ubiquitous and unanimous things that we all agree on in a society where we don't agree on very much. I also think, you just mentioned Amsterdam. So I want to talk about this because I actually think this is a really profound point. It's one that I encountered myself before getting to your book, but you talk about it in the book. There's a sense of like the basically kind of way I thought about it is, Europe was built before the car. They built their cities before the car. Ergo, they have pedestrian-centric infrastructure. A lot of our cities got built after the car. And so we have car culture, just kind of the way it is. It's not really the correct story at all. No. And in fact, Europe was also bombed to smithereens, and they rebuilt a huge part of it, and made design choices that it isn't just some inherited, it has to be this way, Doug. If you want to talk a little bit about, because I do think this is a profound point. Like people they get on a plane, they fly to Paris, and they're, man, this is nice. Or they go to Amsterdam, but like, we can't have this in Dallas, right?
Right, yeah, right.
But they just made a bunch of choices in those places that people now think of as lovely to walk around that were intentional and in some ways got rid of a lot of car infrastructure.
Yeah, Amsterdam is a really great example because in the 1970s, 1971, there were about 3,300 people in the Netherlands who were killed by cars. That was a fatality rate that was about 20% higher than in the United States, if you can believe that. And in around that same year, there was a young girl, Simone Langenhoff, who was killed riding her bicycle in a village in the Netherlands. Her father was a journalist, Vic Langenhoff, and he wrote a story for a Dutch newspaper called De Tide with a very provocative headline, Stop the Kindermoord, Stop the Child Murder. And he called for what he said was, it wasn't very prescriptive, but he said, we need basically a radical rethinking of sort of what is happening on our streets and in our towns. These cars are taking over because many Dutch cities flirted with American-style infrastructure after World War II, as you were saying. And he called for a pressure group, a sort of advocacy group that would come together to fight back against this scourge. And a young mom in Amsterdam kind of took up the banner and started what was called the Stop the Kindermoord movement. It was completely centered around children. Children would take over streets and protest. They would hold signs basically comparing themselves to like innocent little animals hunted by giant bears.
Mhm.
And cut to sort of the end of the 1970s, and some very pro-bike, pro-safe streets people take over, and they start instituting slowly but surely a lot of bike-friendly policies, lower speed limits, things like that. And today, the Netherlands has a fatality rate that is 60% lower than the United States. But if you go to Amsterdam, you still see cars.
Yeah.
You see delivery vehicles, you see spots. There are some places that have banned street parking altogether, except for people with mobility issues, right? They can have a car. So we have these examples around the world. And it is funny because I think, you're mentioning vacation. The kind of point we make in the book is like, there's a little bit of like a revealed preference for what people
Yes.
want in their lives and you can see it in where they go on vacation.
Yeah.
It is the great European cities where you can stroll along the Seine River. It is Disneyland where there are no cars.
Yeah,
It
I
is
mean,
a beach town where you can rent a bike and ride on the boardwalk. And exactly, you go back to your hometown. You're like, well, that would never work here. But I do think people intuitively understand that life is better with fewer cars in it.
yeah, the Disney World example I think is so profound because it's like for a lot of people, the only experience of pedestrian centered design that they have, and it's
Yeah.
awesome. The other example is block parties, right? Like, why is a block party a block party? It's like you just take away the cars. That's it. The thing that makes a block party a block party is you remove
Yeah.
cars from some public space, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this rocks. I got a basketball hoop I wheeled into the center of the street, and the kids are playing on it, and they're face painting, and they're tie-dyeing shirt, whatever they're doing. And all of this is there. That space is always there, and now we took cars away. And it is true that like the Village is another place, right, where you see people on their little golf carts, right? These are people who often are, because their seniors are mobility restricted, but they have created infrastructure that's not a bunch of Ford F-150s. One of the things that you guys talk about in the book is sort of packed with Moloch, the fact that we lose so many people every year.
Yeah.
Sarah, you were talking about this before. I was a teenager in New York City, and one of the things I always say when people would say to me, "Wow, was that dangerous?" I'm like, no one ever drove, and
Yeah.
no one ever drove drunk.
Yeah.
And I know when I got to college, every single person had someone in their high school who died in a car accident. Everyone,
Yep.
like without exception.
Yep.
It's part of the ritual of American life, and we just accept that cost. And one of the things that's really unnerving, which I'd like to hear you talk about, Sarah, is that it's going in the wrong direction. I mean, for years, we were pushing down fatalities per vehicle mile for a whole bunch of reasons. Traffic engineering, car safety technologies, there's a bunch. Those have been going up recently. So we're now in the wrong direction. And that also strikes me as something that like we've departed from the rest of the world. I mean, if people say, hey, look, everyone loves cars and cars are everywhere. It's true. Cars are pretty universal technology. But we're doing something distinct here where we've now untethered from other countries. We're going in the wrong direction in terms of those fatalities. What is happening there that's making us different?
There are a lot of factors, but I think one of the main trends that you see is that a lot of those fatalities that are going up are of people who are outside of the vehicle. So why is that happening? Well, in part because vehicles have gotten so huge in this country. And really, like, yes, they have SUVs. I was just in London and I was talking to somebody, and what would be a small SUV drove by. And she said, that's the kind of thing you have in America, isn't it? I mean, it's just shocking. And I said, that's like, it basically looks like a sedan compared to what many, many people are driving, even in urban areas. So these things they have, the hood comes up to my forehead, and I'm 5'6". A child doesn't stand a chance of being seen. They're not visible in front of the vehicle. Unfortunately, a lot of kids get killed by their own parents rolling over them in a driveway because they can't be seen in these vehicles. There's that. The vehicles are also heavier. That increases the fatality potential. And we're just still driving more and more and more. And the more miles you drive, the more potential there is for death. And these vehicles have now gotten it's an arms race, right? Where
Yeah.
people think, oh, if I drive a bigger car, then I'm competitive on the road against all these other bigger cars. But a lot of them don't handle very well. And no car can protect you from everything that is going to happen in a crash. It's just a huge amount of force being exerted. And you can't protect yourself from all of that. So I think also distracted driving is a huge problem. And now it's being baked into the cars. The cars themselves are distracting you with
So
screens
crazy.
and there's just going to be more. I mean, it's basically going to be a bunch of people, you know, placing their FanDuel bets, as they
Well,
roll down. I mean,
right.
look,
Although maybe
but I'm
it's all
just
going to be
saying, like,
autonomous. I mean,
well,
Right.
and we can talk about that, another time. But like, I do think that is a huge just the size of the vehicles, and again, the resistance to any form of choice about it, so that people just really are compelled by circumstance to drive a lot. And the more miles you put in,
yeah.
the higher your chance of something bad going wrong.
I mean, the explosion in the size of cars is, this is an empirically documented fact. Like they're
Mhm.
getting heavier and heavier. And, there's CAFE standards that sort of require the sort of fleet to be a center around this place. And there's been regulation about this. But, the people will show, here's the Toyota Tundra in 2001 and the Toyota Tundra in 2025. And it's like,
Yeah.
it looks like one ate the other and,
Yeah.
swallowed it basically. It's just like a weird, why do they keep getting bigger? I see that I'm like, that's too big of a car. I don't want a car that big.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's like a little bit of a peacock's tail sort of thing, right? Where it's like they become status symbols. They
Yeah.
become they lose their functional purpose, which is
Yeah.
just to transport you from point A to point B, and that's a big part of car culture and always has been,
Totally.
right? It's how you present yourself to the world. So having the bigger, the best, the newest is going to always be a part of car culture, as long as we're in this fight. But yeah, you mentioned those CAFE standards and those rules. There are, basically it is more profitable for car companies to build large SUVs because of the regulations that allowed these vehicles to start taking over our roads, which were well intentioned at the time, but now have like gone out of control. And try getting a sedan today. It's almost impossible. Very few car makers make a small car. We have the word tyranny built into the subtitle of our book, and that is a form of tyranny when you are devoid of choices in
Yeah.
your life. And as a result of policy and the built environment and politics, that is a form of tyranny. And if you live in a place where the only choice you have is to not only drive, but like when your car breaks down, buy, at this point, people are spending $700 a month on car payments and getting 7 and 8 year car loans that far outlast even like the car's useful life for them,
Yeah.
perhaps. That is again a form of tyranny. It's like, cities and places where you have options, and they don't always have to be Manhattan, where you can, take a bus or ride a bike. That's a kind of freedom that we're arguing for in the book.
One personal note I'll say, I recently bought an electric like Vespa, like scooter, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because there's trips that I need to take that are these sort of like 2 mile, 3 mile trips that the public transportation doesn't. There's these sort of point to point trips that like they're 35 minutes if you try to take a bunch of buses.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take a car. And I also often want to take someone else. So for all these reasons, this made sense. And I was going into the city for the first time because it's now the case that you can take that on the Brooklyn Bridge along with the cars, which wasn't the case before. And so you'd have those in the bike lane, which is not a good idea. But I'm not like a motorcycle person. This thing only goes 30 miles an hour, but it's all legal and whatever. But when you're sitting on that thing next to cars, man, do you feel how big they are in a way
Yeah.
that you do not when you're in an enclosed multi-ton vehicle yourself. And the really big, like the difference between different sizes really strikes you when you're sitting on the road occupying them, which kind of gets to my point here. I want to talk about the emotion around this. You talk about this is such a visceral issue. Like you talk about Whoopi Goldberg yelling at Bill de Blasio about bike lanes, including the bike lane on 10th Avenue, which did not exist. There wasn't a bike lane on 10th Avenue. But it really is when I get into conversations with people, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that I think part of it is status quo bias, right? So we don't, we like the way things are. We're afraid of change. But the bigger thing I think is that when it comes down to it, what we're talking about is kind of zero-sum reallocation, which is how you distribute public space. And that's a very high stakes question. And particularly in dense areas, right? In order for a place to be walkable, it has to be dense. But the denser it is, the more precious that public space is. So like nothing gets my rage valve going like someone double parked on a street when I have to go down that street. I mean, it's like I just go until now that, I've probably done that before myself, but can you talk a little bit about like, why is this such why do people, like you talk about a story of someone like shoving you at a public meeting after this horribly tragic death that happened in Park Slope, talking about a bike lane. I've covered these kinds of things back in Chicago, similar kind of fights. People really go crazy about parking being taken away, bike lanes being put in, a new bus route, all the stuff that around this that would change how things work really like gets people to visceral, sometimes not in an ideological sense, but it's real. It's not some like manufactured by the car company thing. It's real.
Yeah.
What is it about that gets people going?
I think some of it is just loss aversion, right? So the people who have something to lose, parking, a lane of traffic, they have every motivation to get worked up about it and show up at the community meeting and get angry at the advocates and shove them in some cases. The people who don't yet know how much their lives could be improved by having a bicycle lane on a street, I often say it's impossible to organize the tenants of an affordable housing unit that hasn't been built yet, but it's very easy to get the single family homeowners on that street to say, we don't want that vacant lot developed because it'll ruin our views and destroy our property values.
The classic
so I think that's
NIMBY conundrum. Yeah.
that's it in many ways. But you are right. It is completely a zero-sum game. Like at a certain point, cars are not a technology problem. They are a geometry problem. And, you have to find the space in the city to accommodate the pedestrians, the bus lane, the bikers, and the people who need to drive. But I'm mostly leaning towards like the deliveries and the taxis and things like that, the individual drivers and where they want to park. That's, but again, that's a very visceral thing. So, it comes down to that. I think also an argument we make in the book, and we've talked about a little bit here, is it's the water we're all swimming in. People cannot see that there are other ways of living because we've individualized so much in this country that if you change things institutionally, but what does it mean for me? I have to get my mother to her doctor's appointment on, at Columbia University Hospital. And when I come back, there's no place to park. And it's all because of the city bike station. So there's that. I think it's also a very safe culture war. It's different now because all the masks are off everywhere. But there was a period, I feel like, when I first started getting involved where like you couldn't say outright terrible things, in the newspapers. But if you wanted to inflame and get clicks and eyeballs, you could just play off the like old school New Yorkers versus the cyclists. Right. And that was like a fun thing that would, the New York Post really exploited. So I think there's a little bit of that. So it is both not a manufactured culture war and an exploited culture war at the same time, if that makes sense.
But I think it's also important to look at, the difference between the United States historically in a lot of other ways and other nations that have made changes. And it really does have to do with a valuing of the communal project and the idea that this is a community and it's not just a conglomeration of individuals. And in this country, we put so much emphasis on the individual, and the car marries perfectly with that. And the sort of rugged individualism that is the brand of the American citizen, on some level, the idea that you just have to do everything for yourself, the car maps onto that perfectly. And so if somebody's going to say, I'm going to take away your car or your ability to park wherever you want, or anything about that, the ability to go as fast as you want, that is an existential threat in this
Yeah.
country, and I think that we all feel that, and the we lack the tradition, the robust tradition that you have in a nation like the Netherlands of understanding this country is only as good as the sum of everybody who lives in
Mm.
it, and that actually goes back to the 17th century or and maybe even the 16th century when, there were some catastrophic floods. Farmers realized they had to get together and create what they called water boards that were just, basically democratic institutions that said, here's how we're going to manage the water in this area of farming. And it's not going to be every farmer for
Yeah.
himself. It is going to be a communal effort. And we have constructed a country here where that's the opposite of how we think.
It's a good point because the other thing is that it's a myth, right, that it can ever be individual. I mean, that's part of what's
Mhm.
such a tough nut to
Yeah.
crack. I mean, I remember, look, the ideal situation for everyone, right, is that you're the only one using the facility, right? So,
Right.
like, I remember, like, I went back to work in Manhattan much earlier than many people did in that fall. And mostly I was riding my bike in, but when it got super cold, I would drive in because I didn't want to take the subway. This is pre-vaccine. And there was no cars on the road. I was like, well, this is great. I mean, the ideal situation for everyone, right, is like, yeah, I drive and no one else drives, or I use this facility and no one else does. But the point is, it's never that way. Everybody gets a say and everyone's there. So
Yeah.
you have the kind of tantalizing idea that there's always this idea that you're going to kind of like, particularly when you're trying to navigate New York mobility, like I'm going to like figure out it's like, no, there's no shortcut. It's
Right.
from my house to my daughter's school is going to be an hour.
Yeah.
It can be an hour. It can be an hour driving, an hour on the subway, or an hour biking. It's literally the same every way.
Yeah.
If it's a nice day, I can enjoy the exercise of riding my bike up there. I can sit and read on the subway, or I could just like be muttering to myself stuck in traffic in the car. But it's going to be an hour one of those three ways, and there's no way out. But it's this idea that you somehow, the you individual, is going to have some special way out of the collective.
Yeah.
That's always tantalizingly promised, but never actually real.
I think there's a funny thing that you're saying there too, because actually, one of the worst things that can happen to you if you drive is if everybody else decides to drive, right? Like
Yes,
a car is a luxury product that loses its luxury the more everybody else has one. Andre Gors, a French philosopher who wrote a really great essay, The Social Ideology of the Motor Car, basically makes this point. Like, if you have a beach home, no one's going to take your view right over the beach, right? Like that is a thing that like is very hard to lose the value, although people do fight for, not developing beach towns.
Right.
But, if I have a iPhone and I'm the only person who has an iPhone, that has no value. But if everybody has an iPhone, that has immense value for me. Not so with cars. With bicycles, actually, like whether 100 people are riding or just 10 people are riding on my commute, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
No, it's true.
In fact, it makes a bigger difference
probably
in my
better.
safety if more people are riding, safety in numbers, for example, even if there's no bicycle infrastructure. So, the bicycle is this thing that like we can just keep adding them to cities. It's an additive thing that makes life better. More
Well,
cars subtracts.
And I say this to the people in my life who are dependent on cars for mobility and who are also kind of just skeptical about, they're in that category of people that the New York Post is speaking to and Whoopi Goldberg
Yeah.
is speaking to. And we all have many people like that in our lives that we are dear to us and we love, right? And the thing I always say is like, look, it's good if you take my car off. Like, if you need to drive somewhere, it's better if I'm on my bike in the bike lane.
Yeah.
Than being another car on the road. Like, and so I want to be in a situation where like I'm lucky enough that I don't have any mobility issues. I love riding my bike. I can, so I have different options. If I had different options, then I'm not going to be sitting in traffic, clogging it up for people that don't have options. And that I feel like is one way to kind of get it through. The
Yeah.
other thing that's like to me promising about this story, and you guys talk about this, maybe we can talk about this now, is it really is one of these things. We've seen it with congestion pricing here in New York, but you see it with all kinds of stories, many of which you recount in the book, where there's a big fight to take cars out of some space. And people are like, no, it's going to be a disaster. And then you take cars out, or you put in bike lanes, or you make something a pedestrian mall, or you reconfigure the social space that's not car-centric. And almost immediately people are like, well, this is better. And it's never the case. I mean, essentially never that there's some big movement to put the cars back in, which to me is really such a hopeful part of this story
Yeah.
Mhm.
because it is a lot of status quo bias. And when you can get these tangible victories, a lot of policy victories don't work that way. You know what I mean? Like the congestion pricing policy victory to me is one of the most profound I've ever seen. In those same people I'm talking about in my life who I love, who were skeptical, who were like, yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
That never happens
Yeah.
with anything.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
I know.
So this is the one place where I feel like, Doug, if you can talk about when you can get over that and you get to the new world on the other side,
Yeah.
it does seem to genuinely have organic support.
Yeah, I can talk about the city of Ghent in a moment, which we talk about in
Yeah,
the book, because that's
exactly.
really one of the best examples. But I mean, yeah, congestion pricing, City Bike, the Times Square plazas, the smoking ban, Obamacare. There's always this moment right before the policy goes into effect. In Stockholm, where they have congestion pricing, they called it like the political valley of death,
Mhm.
where opposition is at its highest and support is at its lowest. And then
And no one's
it's
enjoying the tangible benefits yet.
you
Right.
can't see it. The worst period of the City Bike story was when they put the stations out, and there was like a 2-week period where there were no bicycles in the stations because they hadn't yet launched it. So all you had were these physical objects taking people's parking,
Yeah.
right? And that was it. And no, the streets were going to run red with the blood of tourists, and no one was going to use the bicycles. All of these contradictory complaints. But then we launched it, and it was almost immediately it was a hit. Ghent is a really great example. It's a small city in Belgium. It's about 260,000 people, big university town too. In 2014, a man named Philippe Watteau, who's basically the deputy minister for mobility there, sort of the transportation commissioner, he really was interested in saying, we've got this problem, too many cars in our historic center. People are using the city as a cut through. They're driving through and they don't really have any business here, not in like they can't come through, but like they're not shopping, they're not dropping someone off, they're not going to work, they're just using it as a shortcut. And he wanted to do something, so he traveled to a few different European cities, including some Dutch ones, and he went to Utrecht in the Netherlands. He also went to Copenhagen in Denmark, and he said these are great, these are amazing cities, but they've basically spent like 30 or 40 years developing into the cities they are. I want to do it faster. We have an election coming up in 6 years. I got to do this on political time, not geological time. And he looked to a city called Groningen in the Netherlands, which had a traffic circulation plan. And he decided to model his city's plan on that. Groningen did not, in the 1970s, have really any sort of bicycle infrastructure. They just had very narrow streets and not a whole lot of room for both bicycles, cars, and everything else in the mix. And they instituted this plan where you just couldn't drive through the center. They reversed some street directions, cut things off. And Watteau said, basically, that's what I want to do. So he goes back to Ghent and they start on this plan in 2014. They're planning to launch it in about 2017. And they divide the city up into 4 quarters. They have this ring road called the R4. And they basically say, like, if you want to go from, District 1 to District 2 in your car, you can't do that anymore. You have to go out to the ring road, around, and back in. And what that does is that adds some friction to the
Mhm.
choice of driving a car. You think to yourself, oh gosh, it's going to take 30 minutes to get where I'm going. I could walk there in 15. I can bike there in 5. And they decided to do this, and they start instituting a bunch of workshops and community hearings. People got really upset.
Yeah,
gonna
even
ruin
as
the
you're
city.
describing it, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's they were anticipating some pushback. It got so bad he got death threats. He had a police detail for the final 6 weeks before this thing went into effect. Basically, on a Friday night in April, they waited for rush hour to end, and they just basically descended his team on the city. They changed 2,500 signs. They reversed the direction or changed about 80 streets. They put up bollards, places where drivers could no longer drive straight through. They totally eliminated cars from the center of the city. You couldn't park there anymore. And the best part, I spoke to Philippe Watteau, and he basically said, so on the Monday morning, I went out with a newspaper reporter and I thought, oh, this is going to be like political suicide, because if people start screaming at me, it's going to be all over the newspaper. And instead, the opposite happened. all of the people who had no idea that this was even possible stopped him and said, "This is amazing. Why didn't we do this sooner?" If you know anything about the history of Ghent, a lot of famous composers are from there. Someone called him the greatest composer the city has ever had, because the sound of automobile noise
Yeah.
just vanished, and you go there and you can hear birds and bicycle gears and people pedaling and kids playing, and it's lovely. It's just as busy with people as before, if not more so. Um, the amount of cycling went way up, for example. But again, it was one of those like overnight things where you
Do
just
it
get
quick.
it done, and boom, the opposition mostly melts.
And Sarah, there's lots of examples now. We have like Paris is going this multi-year thing,
Mhm.
and Barcelona, and lots of places are doing versions of this that again have been incredibly successful and popular. Which I think, I mean, even Paris, which people think of as like iconically a walking city, has really transformed in the last 10 or
Oh,
15
yeah.
years in ways that, Parisians love. And again, there's always backlash for sure. And it doesn't just like completely go away, but broadly, like congestion pricing, like Ghent, it does seem on the other side of the hill, people are pretty happy.
Yeah, I mean, Paris is a great example. I was lucky enough to get to interview the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, a few weeks ago. And, she is just focused on improving the quality of life in her city. That's her, foundational principle. That's what she wants to do. Air pollution was a huge problem in Paris. And so many of these innovations that she's done, taking cars off of the banks of the Seine, reducing the speed on the ring road there, the périphérique, and putting play streets in front of schools, closing streets in front of schools so that they're just basically play areas. All of those things have combined. Paris actually has very little green space, as lovely and walkable as it is, and it has a couple of very big parks, but it doesn't have as much green space as New York does by a long shot. And so the air was terrible. And now you're seeing just, I think, 30% improvement in air quality right away. So, but her guiding principle, like I say, was I want to make this a better place for my people to live. And I am going to deliver that for them. I was elected on this platform and I'm going to do it. And unlike many politicians who get into office and then immediately start thinking about the next election and trying to please everybody and not sticking to what they said they were going to do, she did that. And her attitude was like, I was elected to do this and I'm going to do it. And boy, French people do know how to complain. Very good
Yeah.
at that. And she has taken so much grief about this. I mean, my stepsister lives in Paris. She's like, you know how much people hate her, right? I'm like, yeah, I know, but she got reelected, right? So, there's been that pushback, but that's what you need. You need the political leadership to say, I know that these policies like congestion pricing, it's going to be a win-win-win. It's going to end up being better for pedestrians, bicyclists, drivers, transit riders. Everybody is going to benefit from this policy. And I am going to stick to it and do it. That's what we need in our politicians, is that kind of courage.
And the last thing I'll say on this is that like some of the tensions and conflicts here don't ever go away, right? Because it's shared space. So like in New York right now, like the e-bike issue, that's not like a manufactured issue. Like people feel
Nope.
that deeply. I have watched e-bike folks like almost hit senior citizens. They have hit people. Like we don't have the infrastructure like Copenhagen, which means that everyone's kind of like moving together. And we don't have, for instance, we don't have traffic signals just for bikes, which I think makes a huge difference. In Copenhagen, when you look up at that, when you're biking and you've got a signal just for you, it's like, yeah, you too, buddy. Like you're not exempted from this. It really makes a huge difference. I actually think this is something we should think about in New York. But so some of that really doesn't go away. Like it's not like, particularly as you have new mobility devices and people are on scooters and they're on bikes and they're on e-bikes and like there's going to be more and more of those, I think, honestly, as this kind of like very cheap, low cost, battery driven technology kind of spins out. We're going to have to, like, it used to just be like, here's a car, here's a bike, here's a pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
There's now a whole new category. Where does it fit on the road? Who's accountable for it? And people do feel, I think totally understandably, like a little freaked out and threatened by something zooming by at 25 miles an hour sometimes, the wrong way down, like
Yep.
that feels like a crisis. But to me, it goes back to this point about like, you need universal communal rules that create space for everyone and create guidelines for how that space is shared, basically.
Yeah, I mean, good infrastructure breeds good behavior. That's not to say that there isn't room for massive regulation of a lot of these vehicles that are appearing on our streets. And, the whole point of bicycle lanes is to separate big, fast moving things from slower,
Right.
smaller, more
Right.
vulnerable things. And so I don't want person on like the thing that is essentially a motorcycle,
Motorcycle,
but doesn't have a gas engine riding with me and my 12-year-old son
Right,
in the
right,
bike lane. I don't
right.
want that. But, there are some solutions in addition to regulation, wider bike lanes. To circle it back to Prospect Park West, before that bike lane, over 50% of cyclists were riding on the sidewalk. After the bike lane was installed, it was down to 3%.
Yeah, I
of
don't think I've
cyclists.
ever seen
And
that,
that
actually.
wasn't because they did an education campaign or someone stood at the end of the bike lane ticketing cyclists. It was because, oh gosh, there's a new safe place to ride. So you're seeing in New York, for example, DOT is installing wide bike lanes. And with First Avenue and Second Avenue, there are now places where every now and then you can pass somebody. So if you are a delivery
That's
cyclist
good, yeah.
where time is of the essence, riding next to someone like me who's just kind of tooling along to get home from a doctor's appointment or whatever, you can sort of make that without whizzing by. So look, we're not advocating for a free-for-all so long as it's not a car. That's not what we're
Right.
saying.
No, and I think that's important
yeah.
too, because I will say, as someone, again, this is something very near and dear to me. I live this. I do a fair amount of, when it's not super cold, I do a fair amount of commuting. Like, it can feel like a free for all.
Yes.
Like, it really does. And part of that too is that, again, when you sort of the incentive structure for compensation for delivery folks, which is how many deliveries they can make as opposed to getting paid by the hour, which makes a huge difference because they are incentivized to go fast. It's the same, it's they don't have a meter running, right? They've got to do as many deliveries as they can. And so I think that also is part of the situation too. We've had the huge growth in delivery folks in all cities. I mean, one estimate I saw in New York, it's like 50,000 people, which is like totally wild how many folks that is. But yeah, to go back to that final point about sort of the communal thing, and when my wife and I went to Copenhagen, and we're both very avid cyclists, and that's like obviously cycling heaven. But one of the things that's really wild about it, to your point about the infrastructure, is like, you're so used to biking with just a few people in the bike lane, right? So now you're biking with like dozens. And then there's a red light, and it's like, you look like a real schmuck if you blow that light.
Yeah.
I mean, I will, we're all being honest here. I go through lights all the time on my bike. It's not good. I should not do it, but I sometimes do, right? I would never, what are you going to do? Like, well, 25 people sit there, like waiting for the light to change. You're just like, see you suckers. Like, obviously you don't do that.
Yeah.
And it was such a revelation to me how different it was to have a combination of a critical mass of people, very strong social norms about cycling, and the proper infrastructure. So you're separated from cars and you have your own lights. And it was like a totally different universe.
Yeah.
All of a
But
sudden.
I mean, this is the thing. If you give people accommodations, and, as somebody who grew up in New York, Chris, you're younger than I am, so you don't remember some of it that I remember very clearly, which was the mantra was, we cannot have nice things in the city of New York. When they tried to improve Bryant Park, it was the idea was, no, Bryant Park is always going to be drug dealers and rats and a bunch of ivy that the rats are running around in. Like, that's what Bryant Park used to be. There was a huge outcry of disbelief that could ever be anything different.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Bryant Park is now one of the most beautiful urban parks in the world and fulfills all sorts of purposes. But, this is the thing, is that we're trying to say we could have a better life if we build the accommodations. The social norms come behind and they come with. And you can't create a social norm around e-bikes without giving them a way to be in compliance, without giving them a way to be polite and normal and nice. And we have to acknowledge, I said this 2 years ago at a conference, I said, folks, e-bikes are here. They're a great technology, and so people are going to adopt them. And we have to cope with that. And And if we create the place for them, and I do believe the norms will come.
Yeah.
And we have to hold the delivery companies to account
And
as well.
I do think, Chris, your example is so great because you can take the most renegade cyclists in New York City and just like Star Trek teleport them to Copenhagen, and they'll stop running red lights.
They're not going to do it. They're
So
not
it
going to do it.
tells you,
You're not going to
like,
do it.
there's there's
Yeah.
nothing inherent in the cyclist DNA that
Right.
makes them
No.
run red lights,
Right.
despite what you might hear the cranks say.
Sarah Goodyear and Doug Gordon are the co-authors, along with Aaron Naparstek, of Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile. They also host a podcast called The War on Cars. You should check out the book. You should listen to the podcast. A lot of really fascinating and I think really like hopeful, provocative stuff, because I do think this is one of those areas where there are victories in sight. They're happening every day, both in the US and across the world. So it's great to talk to you guys.
Thanks
Thanks
so
so
much.
much.
Yeah, it was great.